Hello, my name is Pastor Alden Ho. I pastor a church in East Texas in the United States. I want to be able to tell you today a little bit about my story, because what I have experienced is when people meet me, the first thing they always like to say to me is, where are you from? What nationality are you? What's your heritage? So I'll tell you a little bit about me, and I want to be able to share with you how the Lord has worked mightily in my life. I was born in a little country called Singapore on the equator in the southeast part of Asia. And after being born there, before I was 2 years old, my parents immigrated to Toronto, Canada. And that's where I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist. You've heard many testimonies, I'm sure, in your life, but the problem is many testimonies that you hear, people have done drugs, they were living in the world. But I was one of those ones that never really lived in the world. I did not go out smoking. I didn't do drugs. I was never dancing. I was just a very good Seventh-day Adventist. But that's a very arbitrary word. What does good mean in Adventism? Does that mean I'm a solid Adventist or I'm a not so solid Adventist? So I want to share with you my spiritual journey, I guess you could say. I went to public school growing up. And going to public school, I never really studied my Bible very much. I had a lot of secular friends. In fact, I hardly had any Seventh-day Adventist friends. And in the process of not having many Seventh-day Adventist friends, I hung around with them, but I didn't do many bad things. As I grew up, I was studying piano at the age of 5.5 in public school. And then by grade 4, I had the opportunity to also add to that violin. And so I played violin through grade 4, 5, and 6, and then we moved to a different area of Toronto, Canada. And in the process of moving, the school that I attended did not have stringed instruments anymore, and I started playing another instrument. When I came into the music class, the music teacher said to me, well, what would you like to play? I said I had been playing the violin. They said, well, we don't offer the violin, so what would you like to be able to play then? I looked around at all the different instruments and I thought about the tuba, but the problem was the tuba was bigger than I was. So I decided I would play on the clarinet. And that's what I did, is I started playing the clarinet. By the time I came back the next morning, I was already playing songs and taught myself how to play. By the time I was 16 years old, I was a piano teacher, a clarinet teacher and a saxophone teacher. And then after my 12th grade in high school, I decided I wanted to be able to try an Adventist school. So in Toronto, Canada, during that time period, we actually had not 12, but 13 grades, and I ended up going to Kingsway College to be able to study for my final high school year. Even though it was called a college, it's really an academy. So here I was at Kingsway College studying music. After that, I decided I wanted to become not a piano technician, but I wanted to become a music teacher. And that's what I really strove for, was to be a piano and voice and choir and instrumental teacher. So I attended Union College as a student. I was overloaded with a lot of classes. I was not really happy with the overload I was taking. And then during the whole course of affairs, a friend of mine said to me, well, why don't you consider going as a student missionary? And I said I wasn't interested in going anywhere. And then he said, no, go as a student missionary because you get a year off. A year off of school? All of a sudden my attention was perked and I was really interested in taking a year off because I was really getting burnt out in music. And so from there, I finished my studies for that 1 year, and I decided to go as a student missionary. I was looking for a place that would give me a little bit more of my heritage, a little bit more of my ancestry. But unfortunately, China was not open at that time. I'd never been to China before, and I thought that would be a wonderful place to be able to go. But I never had the opportunity to go to China. Instead, I decided the closest to the culture would be to go to Korea, and that's what I did. I ended up going to Korea as a student missionary, and I was teaching English and Bible classes. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my experience on the plane going over there. On the plane flying from Los Angeles to Seoul, Korea, there was a whole group of us students who were heading off there for training, and then we would disperse to our countries in the Asia area. Upon getting in the plane, sitting with all these excited missionaries, student missionaries, one of the student missionaries came to me and he says, "Hey, Alden, what are you teaching for your Bible class?" And I kind of laughed at him and I said, "No, I'm not I'm not going to be teaching a Bible class." And he said, "What do you mean you're not teaching a Bible class?" I said, "No, I'm going to teach English only. I'm not teaching Bible." And he said, "Well, wait a second. Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to Korea." He says, "Yes, and if you're going to Korea, you have a Bible class as well." I found out later from the youth director who was on the flight, when I asked him, Elder Dick Barron looked at me and he says, "Why, Alden, yes, you are going to Korea and you will have to teach a Bible class." I can tell you, friends, that I was in a panic at that point. This was not something I wanted to do. I did not want to teach a Bible class, and there is one very good reason for that, because I did not know my Bible. At 19 years old, I didn't know my Bible at all. Yes, I grew up with devotionals, worships with my family, but I didn't study my Bible at all. I was a good Adventist, but I didn't know the Bible. So I didn't know what to be able to teach. I didn't know what to be able to talk about. Then one of my friends who I had met there that was a student missionary, he said to me, "Alden, well, why don't you start with the book of Matthew?" And I said, "Okay." So that's what I did, is I started the book of Matthew. Not a very good book to start at, because the first chapter killed me with all the begats of who begat so-and-so and begat so-and-so. Let me explain to you a little bit about the classes there in Korea. You teach 5 English classes in the 2-month period, and you have 1 Bible class. The English classes, the students have to pay for. But the Bible class was a free class for the students to be able to come and to practice their English. Not many of them were Adventists. Not many of them were even Christians. But they came to the class. And the more they argued in the class, the more they had an opportunity to talk. And this is what they wanted to be able to do. I came into my Bible class and I started talking. I prepared my lesson beforehand. And I came in there and I started sharing from the Word of God, what God says in the Bible. And in the process of sharing with what that says, I had one of the students in the class who began to engage me in conversation. Now, although I'm 19 years old, many of the students within the class were not my age. Many of them were much older. They were doctors. They were professional people. They were businessmen. They were lawyers. And they wanted to be able to practice their English. And here I was in the English class, and this man started arguing with me. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. So I ran out of the classroom. I ran to my friend's classroom and I knocked on the door and I said, "Tell me, he asked me this question. I don't know what to be able to say. What do I tell him?" My friend calmed me down and he said, "Just tell him you will study the question and you'll answer it tomorrow." And that's what I did. I went back that evening and I went through the Bible and I started looking for the answer to his question. And finally, when I got the answer to his question, I looked at him and I said, "Here's the answer." And I could see him nodding with understanding, and I could look at the other students and they were all nodding with understanding as well. So I said to him, "You understand?" "Yes." "Wonderful. Praise the Lord, you understand." So we went on. Day after day, this would happen. He came into my next Bible study class in the next time period of the 2 months. And he started asking more questions. And that forced me to have to go study and to learn. But there was one particular day I wanted to share with you where he asked me a question. And I didn't have time to respond by saying, let me study it and I'll get back with you. As I was about to say that, all of a sudden my mouth opened and my mouth started talking. And I'm looking at my mouth and I'm looking at him and he's going like this. And he understood. So just to make sure, I looked at him and I said, do you understand what I'm saying? And he says, yes, I understand what you're saying. And when my mouth got done, I looked at him. You understand? He said, yes. And I said, please tell me, what did my mouth say? Because this was the very first time in my life that God had spoke through my mouth. And it was a feeling, an experience that I've never experienced before. In the process of being in Korea, many of the pastors at that time period asked me, are you a student in the seminary? Are you studying theology? You should become a pastor. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm studying music. But during the course of that year, I changed my major from studying music, and I switched to wanting to become a photographer. And that's what I did. I changed majors, and I left Union College, and I went to Andrews University to finish my degree in photography. I went through 3 years of studying photography, and by the time I had graduated, I also not only found my degree, but I found my wife as well. So one weekend in May, I graduated with my degree, and the next weekend is when I got married. Now, I was promised a job photographing. I had interviewed for different jobs, and I found a job where I would be a salesperson selling professional camera equipment in Chicago. And that was a wonderful position, but just 1 month before I was graduating, the company called me and said, I'm sorry to tell you, but the job that we had scheduled for you to be able to take is no longer available. We've had this corporate merger together, and so this job is not available anymore. So that sent me into a little bit of a panic mode because I am soon to graduate, and I did not have a job yet. Well, being a last year, final year photography student, I had to display all my photography work, and that's what I did is I posted them up and put them in the gallery. There was a man that came and started looking at the pictures, and he liked what he saw. And he came and said to me, what are you doing when you graduate? And I said, I really don't have anything scheduled right now. No plans. My plans fell through. And he said, I would like to hire you to be able to work for me doing photography. His name was Tom Pangborn. And Tom was a businessman who photographed. Part of his business is he would fly in a plane, he would photograph sailboats, and besides sailboats, we would photograph golfers, and we would photograph skiers, and then we would sell these pictures to the people who are interested in these images. So he said to me, I would like to have you work for me. Well, let me give you a little bit of a background of Tom. Tom was, at one point, a Seventh-day Adventist, but he had left the church back in the early 80s through a man named Desmond Ford. Desmond Ford took many Seventh-day Adventists away from the church, and he was with his theology. So my boss, Tom, had left the church. In fact, he was a former Seventh-day Adventist pastor. Now he owned this business. He was not keeping the Sabbath. He understood my position about where I stood on the Sabbath. So although he would go out and photograph on the Sabbath, these sailboat races, I did not do that. So week after week, we went out and we photographed during the summer months, during June, July, August. At the end of August into September, there is this very big sailboat race. It's a regatta. It's a sailboat race. And in this particular race, they race from Mackinac Island down to Chicago, a very long race of several hundred miles. The race started Saturday. I did not photograph it. We were going to continue the photography on Sunday. And in the process of coming on Sunday, as we were waking up in the morning on Sunday, I went to pick Tom up at his home, and we were heading to the airport. And we were flying in a very small plane. It's a 4-seater plane. It's a Cessna. The Cessna is very, very tight inside the plane. In fact, when I'm seated in the co-pilot seat and the pilot is in the pilot's seat, if I put my hand out the window, in fact, my left hand goes out the pilot's window. That's how far or how close that area is. So here I am in the co-pilot seat. We arrived at the airport, and as we arrived in the airport, I looked at the windsock. And the windsock wasn't just hanging, it wasn't sticking out a little bit. The windsock was sticking straight out because it was a very windy day. The wind was blowing very strong. And I looked at my boss and I said to him, "Are you sure you would like to fly? Because it's kind of windy out today." He was very optimistic and he said to me, "Yes, we're definitely going to go up today." I said, "Okay, well, that's what we'll do. We will go up today." He said, "You take the camera equipment and put it into the back of the plane, and I will do the pre-flight and fuel the plane and get it ready." So that's what I did. I went to the car, took the equipment from the car, and put it in the back 2 seats of the plane. We loaded all the gear. He did all the checks. Everything was good. And we started taxiing down the runway. The whole time I'm looking at the windsock, and it is sticking straight out. And I said, "Well, I guess we're going." When we took off, when those 3 little wheels left the ground, all of a sudden things started shaking. It was about a 15, 20-minute flight from the airport to the lake to where we were photographing the sailboats that were racing. Upon arriving at the lake, we saw the little white dots from the altitude we were flying, and we came down with the plane to about 400 or 500 feet, which was about maybe 150, 160 meters high. In the process of coming down, he said to me, "Okay, everything looks good. Let's get ready to photograph." That was my signal to reach into the back of the plane to grab my camera. Now, back then, we weren't shooting digital at all. It was all film. And I was shooting with a big camera. It's called a Pentax 6x7. The negative is a very big negative it produces. And I reached back there, grabbed the big camera lens, and I also opened the window of the plane. Now, the window of the plane in the door is not like a window in a car. In the car, you either wind down the window or you push a button and the window goes down. In this particular plane, the window is actually hinged. So the top is hinged and it only opens so far and it stops right there. So in order for me to be able to photograph through there, I didn't want to be able to photograph through the window. So we always undo the latch to be able to take the window and hold it up. The Cessna is designed that the wing is up high and the body of the plane is lower, the fuselage. This allows for a photographer to be able to look out the window without having a wing in the way. And with the 172 Cessna, there is a support bar that comes out that holds the wing up. When I opened the window of the plane, I put a piece of wood up there to hold the window up against the bottom of the wing of the plane. And in the process of doing that, now I have a full view of what was going on. Now, I will tell you that as we fly, usually we fly straight like this. For me, as a photographer, because I'm on this side of the plane, we always turn the plane this way. And as we fly, we go round and round this way so that I would have a view of the planes down below, of the boats down below. And as we were photographing, he would go round and round the boats until I got the picture that I was looking for. After I got the picture, normally I would almost be out of film. I would have to change my film while he goes to the next boat. And that's what we did. We went to the next boat and we would photograph. This was our second boat. There was a little bit of fighting with the wind because every time you go around, the wind would push us, the wind would pull us, the wind would be a headwind. So it would constantly change. As we went to the third boat, I remember between the third and the fourth boat, he went to the dashboard of the plane on the cockpit and he hit a switch. I didn't know until years later. That switch was a switch that lowers the flaps of the plane to be able to allow you to land the plane. But since we're flying over water, we weren't really wanting to land the plane. He was slowing the plane down, and we were slowing down to about 25 knots. In the process of slowing down, now you're fighting with the wind, and you may lose your lift. In aviation terminology, lift is what happens that keeps the plane up as the wind goes over, the air goes over the wings. In the process of flying, we went from this angle, and he lost control of the plane, and we went fully to a vertical. So I am actually looking down the window of the plane, down to the lake. He corrected for it, and he went this way, and all of a sudden, because we had no lift holding us up, we actually went down, and we hit the lake at well over 160 kilometers an hour. In the impact of hitting the lake, we hit so hard that all the windows of the plane were broken, and the plane started to sink immediately. We did not hit the lake just bouncing along the lake. We actually hit the lake, and like a bird that flies straight into the water to catch fish, we hit that lake so hard that only about less than 2 meters of the tail of the plane was actually sticking out of the water. And within a few moments, that also sank below. So here I am. I'm inside the plane. Tom is in the plane with me. I'm holding my breath. My eyes are closed, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't think this would happen. I went to try to open the door, but the door wouldn't open. And I'm trying to struggle to get out. And, you know, they say just before you die, your life flashes before your eyes. And that's exactly what happened. My life flashed before my eyes. It said, look, you just graduated. You just got married. You just started this new job. Why is this happening? And I went to undo my seatbelt. And in the process of undoing my seatbelt, I undid both seatbelts, Tom's seatbelt and my seatbelt. But unbeknownst to me, in the actual accident when we hit the water, Tom was killed instantly in the plane crash. His head, both of us, because we were sitting shoulder to shoulder, both of us went into the dashboard. He hit the dashboard the same way I hit the dashboard. But for some reason or another, Tom was killed instantly. When I hit the dashboard, I had blood coming from my head, but I didn't know that because I was in the water. So I'm inside the water, and I'm thinking, I got to get out. How do I get out? But the door was not opening. I remember that the window was open, but one thing I didn't know is my chair, my seat, actually slid forward inside the plane. And as it slid forward, my legs got jammed underneath the dashboard, and the window that was over here now had shifted backwards because my seat slid forward. And here I am inside the plane, trying to figure out how to get out. I managed to get out the window of the plane. I remember saying, I've got to get out the window. Now, people have asked me, did you lose consciousness? Did you black out? And I said, no, I didn't, because I know that if you black out or if you lose consciousness, God had designed our bodies in such a way that if you do lose consciousness, your body continues to beat, your heart beats, but you continue to breathe. And this is how many people die. They don't realize that they're underneath the water, and they go to breathe, and they take in water, and then they drown. But I know that I did not drown. I was inside the plane. I remember saying, I've got to get out of the plane, and I remember getting out of the plane, but I don't remember the process of going through the window. All I remember saying is, I've got to get out, and the next thing I know, I'm outside the plane. And I'm wondering, how did that happen? From being outside the plane, I got up to the surface of the water. And as I came to the surface of the water, here I am trying to swim. But my body was not cooperating with me. My left side of my body was in a lot of pain. I managed to get into a motorboat, and there were two brothers that were fishing. They came and they were able to grab a hold of me. They waited till the motorboat came, and these brothers passed me over to the motorboat. And from the motorboat, we went to the dock, and from the dock, the ambulance came. And when the ambulance came, they rushed me into the hospital. This was a special hospital that happened to be the only hospital in my area, and it was a trauma center. They were equipped to be able to handle my situation. When I entered the hospital, they started treating me as an emergency patient. I had a neck brace on. I was on a board. My left foot was very large, almost like the size of a football. And the doctors started talking to each other. They weren't sure exactly what happened to me. One doctor realized after many x-rays, he said, "We need to take you into surgery." And as they were trying to decide what to do with me, the doctor said, "We want to take you into surgery. And when we take you into surgery, what we're going to do is we've got to do some operating on you." They didn't tell me what. So all I know is I was going into the operating room. And once I entered the operating room, I came back out after several hours of surgery. I was in the recovery ward. And then I remember the doctor, he came into me when I was recovering from the anesthesia. And that doctor looked in my face. I was struggling to understand what was going on. I was a little groggy from the medication and things that happened. And during that whole process, he says the following words to me that I will tell you in the next message that will follow after this one. Stay tuned.